Hello again, Station Architects. Welcome to another episode of Stationeers News. It's 2025 August the 9th, and while we're getting closer and closer to the greatly anticipated Stationeers terrain update, in parallel to designing worlds, the devs went crazy and added some pretty significant things, as you can see. So how can we get arbitrary texts onto these LEDs, which are part of the kit console? How can we do that? Obviously by just writing a value to their setting logic parameter. But what value is that? Technically, we'd have to OR some values together to write at most 6 characters onto the display. But instead of us having to waste a lot of lines, and also which number means which character ponderings, they gave us a new statement. str. Just put the text in you want, and this will create the number. If you put in more than 6 characters, the IC housing will show a descriptive error. Does it scroll by default? No, this is just me putting some scrolling effect in here. You can see the source on screen. It's really that simple. So now we can show meaningful texts, error messages, alerts, even dynamic texts, because there's no limit in principle. But that's not all they changed about the LED. Instead of the original 3 modes, now we have a bunch more, one of them being the text. The default is 0, just showing a number, you can see that here on the left. 1 is %. The value you're seeing on all the displays is always identical, so 2.2 is 220%. Mode 2 is watts, 3 is Kelvin, or kilowatt or kilokelvin depending on the number. 4 is Celsius, 5 is meters, 6 is credits. I don't know if that looks like a $sign in your region. Number 7 is seconds. Number 8 is minutes. And number 9, for whatever reason that I can't fathom, is not hours but days. This recording is outdated. By now we have proper lowercase characters, so now that really looks like days. Number 10 is text. Mode 11 is Fahrenheit, which is spelled with an H, but they had accidentally spelled that without. That's when I recorded this. Has been fixed by now. Mode 12 is liters. Mode 13 is moles, aka an objective amount of gas, unrelated to pressure. And finally, at least for now, mode 14 is pascals, or kilopascals, in other words pressure. In case you haven't noticed, Rovers are back on beta, at least the small ones, which could transport 4 portable tanks, or 2 crates, or something in between. They'll be pretty handy, since now deep miners will give you different stuff depending on where you place them. For this we have the new deep miner cartridge, which can be printed for cheap, but I assume it will become much more expensive in the future, since it's basically identical to the GPS cartridge, except it also shows what a deep miner could bring to the surface and in what ratios. So once you've set up your deep miner stations, you can drive there and collect your ingots with a rover. You might think,
nah, I'm not gonna drive that. Once I have nuclear batteries, I won't care so much.
You don't need nuclear batteries for this thing. With 3 large batteries, you can drive for quite a while, and you can bring some more. Anyway, storms damage the rover, and now you can even repair them. That's the new thing. Use duct tape. Keep holding the button, no partial repairs. Pretty unspectacular episode so far, huh? Well, hold my beer. Out of nowhere at all, the Discord beta changelog of Stationeers suddenly kept showing entries talking about the shuttle. In other words, we may soon be flying around in the worlds, which may answer the question, how can we reach faraway outposts? Please mind, the devs have not promised that the shuttle or something like it will be in the game. Rovers and shuttles had been in Stationeers for a long time, just deactivated. Now the devs are playing around with the shuttle to find out whether it or something like it should be in the game and how to make that happen. So this here may well be a passing phenomenon. Okay, to keep things spectacular, here's some actual tangible thing that we can now do in our stations. So what was this? A bursting pipe that we can measure with the pipe analyzer, as long as this is all on the same pipe network. Just check the network fault logic value. So, in the shuttle footage, you already saw the new terrain version of Vulcan. This is quite what it'll be looking like. It's not yet fully done. For example, there's no ore yet. The terrain is certainly easier to traverse than on the old Vulcan, right? Supposedly we should still be having these lava cracks here, but I couldn't find any. Remember the old Vulcan? No matter how far we set the rendering distance, the horizon was always a lake of lava, which was kinda neat, but was just a 3D rendering artifact. The new Vulcan, however, will have actual lava lakes. I placed these here myself with a terrain editing tool, so the current beta version of Vulcan doesn't have those yet. But you can bet your ass that these will be in the terrain update release. And what happens when we step into it? well, you know, your suit gets destroyed and you die. These lava lakes will make something like a shuttle to traverse large distances through the air even more interesting. Though again, the shuttle isn't guaranteed. Would you look at that? Vulcan has evolved a lot. The cracks are back. That does feel so different from the stuff I showed you a minute ago. Glorious. It has this feeling of discovery, of exploration. Now the terrain feels serious. It's not just a place that you're in where you can build a bit, but you have to be careful. You have to be aware. You have to look around. Wow, this glowing stuff? Awesome. Yeah, the cracked planet was too close to the black hole, so the tidal forces turned it into this bizarre cracked hellhole. Side note, if they're still saying that this black hole is super massive, then the planet doesn't check out, because the tidal forces around the event horizon of a supermassive black hole are very weak. You could just fall in without even noticing. So the black hole here, which I believe is called Janus, should rather be a small one. Don't you hate it when you went mining and forgot to turn on your beacon, and then you actually got into a situation where you would need that, and yeah, have fun finding that. Best experience ever to be on an odyssey then and actually finding it. Has happened to me a few times. Anyway, and I believe this will be controversial, the RocketWerkz team just changed the tracking cartridge behavior. As you know, you can use the mouse wheel to select all the potential targets that it could track, and there's now a new one, your lander. So if you haven't dismantled that, which is faster at the beginning, you know? Just whip out your angle grinder and take it down. All the boxes will fall and you've saved time. But in the future, you may not want to do that, because if the lander is near your base, which it usually is, then now you have a beacon that will run endlessly, that doesn't need a battery, that you don't have to turn on, that you don't even have to create, and you can always find your station. This takes away some interesting gameplay element, so that's why I think it'll be controversial. It's a good decision, but it's not perfect. We're still not done with the news items. Here you can see that now all 4 pipe types, insulated and non-insulated, liquid and gas, also come in the long variants. 10 pieces, 5 pieces and 3 pieces. But there's another new thing. The same now applies to the chutes. Hello. And the transfer is even instantaneous, so there's another upside. By the way, one of the reasons the devs are introducing all this stuff is to keep the amount of objects in the world lower. But you can also tell that they are expecting that on average our stations will be a bit more elaborate. This may also be in anticipation of the eventual nuclear power plants that we'll be building. The portable tanks, once they're wrenched down on the portables connector, can now be interacted with. At least the lid can be used. You can stick bottles in or take them out. It works completely naturally. Gas amount equalization and all that. Oh, by the way, did you know you could abuse these guys as pumps that cost no energy? See, these valves at the top, which we still can't operate while the tank is wrenched down, though they will keep their open or closed state when affixed like this, are a pressure regulator. Whatever value you set here is what they will aim to achieve in the surrounding environment. So as long as the value set here is lower, nothing will happen. As soon as it's higher, they will just keep pumping. So yeah, you can even evacuate a canister, which would normally take a pump and some electricity. Not sure what to think about this. I'd like Stationeers to be more realistic. Oops. The ice crusher has been vastly improved. Beginners will love this. The front panel will explain clearly what the current internal state is, for example the temperature, which is now even being expressed in Celsius. Something I think is also happening in other device tooltips now. And there's even a dial with which you can set the target temperature. So that one thing for which you would have to place down a logic writer and a memory chip, so that the crusher no longer wastes electricity and time on melting water ice or whatever, can now be done with just the touch of a button. Some of you may not like this, but Stationeers' onboarding measures are pretty weak at the moment, so if the gameplay becomes more approachable like this, I think that's a very good thing. While the crusher is heating the ice, this LED is showing red, else it's green. Thank you RocketWerkz for this tangible improvement. There have been a lot more improvements on the logic and programming front, but before I get to those, I want to stick with the easily approachable stuff that most people can relate to. Have you already noticed? This left wide door is new. It's a wider variation of the airlock door that you can see here, and it's built from the same kit. By the way, what you just saw there through the door was the blast door, which does not have a convenient button for operating it, but on the other hand, it can withstand arbitrarily high pressure. But it's not new, it has been in there for a long time. I'm personally not so involved with elaborate trading platforms. Best I did was a 5x5, so this demo runway is probably wrong. Anyway, the devs changed some things around this. The lights on the runway are now on and the landing spot is now blinking, it's animated. So that would be a bit more useful if you'd actually be the one who has to land there. Wonder if that's even the plan. After all, if the shuttle, big if, would make a comeback, why not have some kind of proper landing pad for it? Oh, there's another thing that they added here. In addition to the small tanks that we can install here, there's also now a big one. It's 2x2 in size. I haven't measured what the liters are, but let's just assume it has at least 4 times the volume. So, can you spot the bugs here? The line numbers are wrongly spaced. The line numbers are visible in the drop-down list, and so is the source code. And this is very cumbersome to use if you have to move the entire screen. Would be cool if the devs would eventually work on this one, right? Oh, they did. This is what it looks like now. Line numbers correct, no more text shining through. The entries seem a bit bigger, so they're easier to use, but that's not all. Look, we can just use a mouse pointer directly. Now that is convenient. And that will be standard for everybody at all times once the terrain update is out. We have another significant but still very early work in progress novelty on our station computers, the map motherboard. In its earliest draft, it just showed the minimap for the respective world. In its current, of course not complete state, it doesn't show anything unless you have discovered, so to speak, an area which is currently simulated by clicking this button. But in addition to that, there's an optional overlay which shows us the deep minor regions. I heard that rocketry can be used to map the planet, but I didn't read up on that. One of the reasons being I still have to begin to deal with rockets. And there's actually some new stuff on that front too, but I'm not gonna cover that because I can't even show you anything. Some new nozzle and tank kind of things. I don't even understand this stuff, so sorry, you have to discover that for yourself. Anyway, I hope that the maps here will not be exclusive to rocketry, because once I have a rocket, I don't care about finding deep minor regions. That would be the wrong order of events. This should be discoverable by moving around in the world, by walking, jetpacking, rovering or shuttling across these glorious lands for the purpose of having a digital copy or something. Yeah, the map motherboard is definitely a work in progress. The devs changed it again. For testing, they now have this sinus curve that slowly reveals the terrain automatically. The devs said, will auto-reveal for now until it's hooked up to the appropriate device. What will that be? Curious. Maybe you don't know, but motherboards in general can be stabbed with a screwdriver. This makes a lot of sense in case of the airlocks, which can break if you deconstruct and reconstruct an already assigned device. But in the case of the map motherboard, this doesn't have any effect. Anyway, when I made a second map motherboard, my suspicion was confirmed. The data is bound to the motherboard. So if I swap this between the laptop and the PC, we would see one of them is empty, one of them has the discovered data. And for my next trick, did you know you can operate the Airlock consoles, and others too I guess, through a window? And did you know that the distance from which you can operate them was not limited so far? Well, thankfully they fixed that now. I mean, you can still click them through a window, questionable, but they reduced the distance and also improved some game logic on the back end, which should save us a bunch of cycles. Stationeers user interface is certainly the most complained about aspect of the game, so it's a big deal whenever something changes about it, and it just did. We can now drag items between our inventories while holding a hotkey, which will effect that all items of that particular type will be dragged. Or even all items, period. Here, 2 new keys that you can configure for this. Left control moves all, and left shift only moves all of that type. While we're at it, you don't have to drag items between your hands and your inventories the whole time. You can just press the right mouse button. That will teleport them. In case you didn't know that, this makes handling items often a lot quicker. As you can see, RocketWerkz has worked on the Cryotube quite a bit. Not only do we have this nice liquid nitrogen visualization, but also the info panel is now a lot more informative. And again, we also see the translation to Celsius. The tube now has a second inlet, As you know, for the first one, you often just attach a curved gas pipe and stick a pipe cowl onto it so that you can enter the cryotube. This would then heal you, so no need to produce any more pills with the chemistry station. But now there's also a connector for liquid, and you're supposed to put liquid nitrogen in here. If nothing's connected, then you get helpful error messages here in the info panel. This should make it much easier for beginners to use this thing. Devs are sure trying to polish this upcoming release. For example, maybe you remember that some items in the Stationpedia say they consume power when in fact they don't. This has now been cleaned up. Nice! The soil around ore is now discolored a little, depending on what ore you'll find in that place. Once the terrain update finally goes public, players will find their save game system significantly changed, as most of you already know. Classically, Stationeers creates 5 files for each save game, and it automatically creates backups whenever you use quick save. Same probably for autosave, but I'm not using it, so I'm not sure. The binary world data, aka the terrain, took up a huge chunk of this, so with that and all the backups, all your save games combined can easily eat up 10 to 30 gigabytes on your hard disk, so you may want to consider to delete some backups. So that's one thing. The other is, if you use the save as function in the menu, that created an entirely new save game, so it creates a new root folder in which there is a save game and a folder for the backups. The new system is vastly different. Here, each save game consists of only one file. The truth is though, it's still 5 files, saved as a zip file, which has just been renamed. It's astonishing how many people don't understand, and we have Microsoft to thank for that what the system will do when you click a file is dependent on its file extension, which on Windows is hidden by default, which is very dangerous when it comes to viruses and such. So the new system has .save files, so the extension is save. If you would rename that to zip or append.zip, you could just double click it and you'd see the files. Or you can just use 7-zip or another convenient capable tool. The new terrain data in the save games is much smaller, because only the changes are saved. Because since the worlds are predefined and not procedurally generated, the game can just lean on those definitions, because they should always be true. So only the differences are saved in your save game. Plus the whole thing is compressed. So there's one big difference. Another is, instead of the backups folder, we have 3 subfolders: autosave, manual save, quick save. And all of these can have multiple instances of your save file. So if you press F5 to quick save, the subfolder quick save will get a new save game. If you have autosave on, the same happens in the autosave subfolder. And when you explicitly manually save it, this will not start a new folder for these saves. Instead, it will just save that to the manual save subfolder. So if you actually want a new instance of that entire thing, you would have to manually copy that save game root folder. Will Stationeers limit the amount of files that it saves here? Yes. The default is 5. The actual algorithm is, if you do a quick save, for example, it will create that save game. Afterwards, it will check how many save games are in that quick save folder, and if it's more than 5, it will take the oldest one based upon the file name which expresses the date and will delete that. In other words, if somehow you manage to have 15 save games in there, then afterwards it will not be 5. No, you created a new one and also one was deleted. And here, brand new on beta, we can now define the maximum number of autosaves and quick saves. So if I set that to 10 now and create a bunch of saves, the max amount will be 10. But if I set it to 5 again, the amount remaining will still be 10, so it doesn't auto-delete those save games. In other words, if you play around with this setting, this will not suddenly delete some files. Don't worry. The AdvTablet has 2 slots for cartridges, and you always have to tediously open the inventory and click on the Pref or Next buttons to switch. There's still no hotkey for that, like there is no hotkey for switching the mode of the mining drill or the mode of the liquid vacuum. But what you can do now, and I don't know when that was introduced, you can now program the mode of the AdvTablet. A while ago that was impossible, but now it works, as you can see here. I just programmed that whenever the tablet turns off, it toggles to the other cartridge. That's slightly cumbersome, but also pretty convenient. I don't know if I could have done that by placing a chip in the AdvTablet. Instead, I placed a logic transmitter, selected the AdvTablet, and controlled it here from the station. But here's something actually new about the AdvTablet. There's now an activate button. The purpose is just to give you some remote control possibilities that don't require you to abuse the previous next or the on-off button. So now we actually have 8 possible values, 3 bits. We have on-off, we have first or second cartridge, and we have activate or deactivate. The Stationeers devs changed the important button so that it no longer makes these annoying sounds. And so I wrote a program here. I cannot open this because it's locked, but I can open it with the AdvTablet and close it, of course. but I can close it manually and push the button once it's open, and the button on the advanced tablet keeps track of its state. All that had to be programmed, it wasn't implicit. It's a bit cumbersome that the IC housing always takes that much space, right? It has two connectors, one at the top, one at the bottom, one for logic, one for power. No more. The IC housing kit now has a second build, where power and logic are combined. Neat. There's more on the topic of programming. The Hydroponics device, not to be confused with the Hydroponics tray from the same kit, which you can place next to each other, can deliver two new logic values via its cable connector, the MaturityRatio and the SeedingRatio. According to my tests, these are not yet fully implemented because they both always have the same value, even though that doesn't make sense, and they never reach 1, and when the plant is dead, they still have a high value. But I guess that's an easy fix that the devs will eventually get to. And while we're on the topic of IC10, what is currently being introduced is IC chips that come pre-programmed, that you can buy from traders. Or you could now find an IC10 if the world is so designed. If you create a world, you could place an IC10 in there, and so if someone starts playing the world, that chip will still have its program. Well, and you know the tutorials, yes? They are worlds with the station. Now with this IC10, the devs actually could deliver some tutorials that come with some sophisticated logic. So that's very promising, and of course we could do that too. I recently found something disappointing about the IC10 execution. You know that you should use a yield statement, right? Because once 128 statements in your code have been executed, the game will force a pause. It will just skip to the next game step and then your code continues its execution. So players usually have a main loop and place the yield statement right after the start marker, so that they are in control of when that yield happens. As long as the execution doesn't need a second one, that's very viable. But now I found out by testing, it's not about 128 statements, it's about 128 lines. So if you make your code more compact, more can be executed before the game would force a yield. Yes, even empty lines and commented out lines will be executed, so to speak. However, I also tested what happens for jump statements. If you jump over a bunch of lines, those will not be counted. SDB setting, and then a value. For the IC housing, that will show some information when you point at it. So far, this was only a number, but now we can actually use texts. As per usual, the maximum amount is 6 characters. Neat. Well, hello, we got a new MIPS programming command. Branch device not valid load, branch device not valid save. So if you're trying to load a logic value from a device, but the device does not support that logic value, this command will jump to the given line or label. And its partner checks whether you can write to the given logic value. Sadly, this only works for device assigned to the screws, D0, D1 and so forth. It doesn't work if you just give the device ID. Many people have wished for that, because then you could scan around which ID is valid and which isn't. But no, this doesn't exist. Instead, we have, and had for a long time, a command that jumps if a device isn't set, and actually one that branches if a device is set. In addition, for some of these commands, the AL variant exists, which allows you to return to the place from which you just jumped away. Just like J versus JAL. To return to that place, you just jump to RA, the return address register. Lots of new logic things all of a sudden. For those who have been struggling to program a PID algorithm in Stationeers, the kit logic processor now has a simple PID chip, which is not meant to replace any implementations you've already done, but to serve this basic functionality for those who don't know how to implement it, like myself. I only just read up on what a PID even does. Let's say you want to keep a certain value in balance, for example when you're mixing fuel. One approach could be to just brute force turn on and off a pump that is part of your custom mixer setup. But a more elegant solution is one that adjusts the pump's power setting, and that requires not just the obligatory constant measurement, but also value adjustment. How much to adjust the value? That can certainly be hard-coded without a PID, by just saying this value is low, that value is high, choose one in between multiplied by and so forth. But a PID not only measures the error, which is the difference between what is and what you want, but it also has the accumulated error, like what was the error in the previous game tick, what was it before, what is it now, the sum of all that, and the development of the error, is it growing or is it shrinking? And this then, is my understanding, can somehow be used to define how your actuator, for example the pump, needs to be adjusted. Again, I just read up on these things, but you probably heard some Stationeers talking about how to implement a PID, and now you can begin to gather some experiences with that with this chip, which is supposed to be a basic implementation. You can read out various logic values from this chip that will help you make your decisions. Look how beautiful Europa is. This is what the devs have been cooking up for us. And this is not an experiment, this is the new Stationeers, and we'll be getting that in just a couple of weeks. You will see kilometers of terrain all the time, not just 100 meters. The devs are really pushing to get that update out. We even had some updates on a Saturday. But then on Sunday they pushed 7 updates on beta. 7 in one day. They're not kidding. So don't forget that when you scroll past all those DLC, right? Okay, that's it for today, and I think it was quite enough. See you again next time.